We're live. Good evening, everyone. My name is Zach Cosner. I'm Florida Conservation Voters Climate and Clean Energy Advocate. And as part of our ongoing Energy Week, I want to make sure that the hard work of our partners is magnified and they can tell you some of what the amazing things that they're doing across the state. And let the conservation voters know how to act on some of the most challenging climate and energy issues that we face. So to kick us off, let's introduce ourselves. Mackenzie, how about you start? Share with us who you are and where you work and what you're up to right now.
Of course. Thank you, Zach, and grateful to be here. My name is Mackenzie Marsland. I am the climate justice organizer for Florida Rising, formerly New Florida Majority. I'm also a member of the Miami Climate Alliance, and I'm also co-chair to the Clean Energy Working Group for the Miami Climate Alliance. And some of the work that I've been doing is starting up local campaigns like Ready for 100 in Miami-Dade. Also working on legislation or combating the terrible legislations at the state level. And yeah, just connecting. We're connecting the work with community members to the clean energy work. Thank you.
Great. And Emily, how about you go next? Well, while we're waiting on Emily, Susan, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. I'm Susan Glickman. I'm the Florida Director of Southern Alliance for Clean Energy. And I have the privilege of having worked on climate and energy issues for 2 decades now. I have my fingers in a little bit of everything, whether it's a proceeding, and you'll hear more about later, at the Florida Public Service Commission to bring about more programs from utilities to help people be more efficient, or in the legislative process, and we're going to talk about that now. And I've spent a couple decades fighting the powers that be there. So I'm privileged to work with everybody here on the phone tonight, and hope we can just bring a little information forward about what's going on climate and energy issues.
Great. And Emily?
Well, Emily's been having some sound problems, but she's pretty fantastic organizer with the Sierra Club and a past year of the Miami Climate Alliance as well. So hopefully we can get her voice hooked in here, because she's got a lot to share with people about the Ready for 100 campaigns that she's been spearheading.
Absolutely. And we know that climate change is the greatest threat facing Florida. And we know that to stop climate change, we're going to have to address the source, which is carbon emissions. As advocates, we often ask lawmakers to act on climate. What does that mean to you all? Mackenzie, how about you go first?
Yeah. So climate action means taking a multifaceted approach, because it's a multifaceted issue. That means like applying climate action to public health, energy, labor, transportation, and more. But that also means ensuring that policies that we are creating to take a step towards clean energy and to stop climate change. We must address the inequality, right? We must address, make sure that impacted and frontline communities are addressed, are in the conversations, and also if we don't address equity and race, we risk we risk perpetuating the same policies that we wish to undo now, and just making sure that communities that are impacted are at the forefront and included in the policies that we create.
Yeah, Zach, I don't see you on the screen, but I'd like to pick on what you just said. Mackenzie, because we have to have an equity lens for every single thing we do. And historically, the pollution that we're concerned about, whether it's dangerous carbon pollution, greenhouse gas pollution, or it's more things like particulate matter coming from a coal-fired power plant, that's more likely to be in, you know, a frontline community or a low-income neighborhood. So you're talking about people that are suffering from the pollution on kind of the front end, and then on the back end, they're getting the worst impacts of climate change. So whether we're dealing with sea level rise in vulnerable communities, or killer heat, or an increase in mosquito-borne diseases. So here we are in this era of COVID, right? So COVID-19, after all, is a respiratory virus. So every time you get an internal combustion engine off the road, you're helping protect people's public health. And you're cleaning up the pollution, and then we're avoiding the worst impacts of climate change for sort of other impacts down the road. And of course, those are gonna be felt most deeply by those that are hurt first and worst. Zach, I see you back on the screen.
Absolutely. And thank you for that, Susan. And now we have Emily back now. So Emily, I was hoping you could introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what you see as the most critical way and the most critical things we need to take into consideration in addressing the climate crisis. Unless we still don't have you.
Well, Zach, let me pick up on one thing, because when we talk about climate, there are sort of two big giant buckets. One is adaptation. We are going to have to adapt to the climate impacts that have already been baked into the pipeline. The South Florida Climate Compact tells us we're going to have 2 or 3 feet of sea level rise, even if we turn off the CO2 spigot tomorrow. The Governor DeSantis has put $1 billion in his budget over 4 years to deal with adaptation, and there will be necessary measures that we need to take. There's a lot we could dig in for an hour just on that. They're the equity lens of it, and also making sure that we use sort of natural barriers. But if we don't stop putting more pollution out, if we don't do the mitigation, the greenhouse gas reductions, move to clean energy solutions, you can't adapt your way out of this problem, because 2 or 3 feet will become 4 or 6 or whatever. And so I just want to lay that out for people, because as you said earlier, what does it mean to take climate action? We need to do all those things, but we have to dramatically reduce greenhouse gas emissions if we want to avoid the worst impacts.
Absolutely. And to that effect, Susan, as most people know, for about 8 years under the Rick Scott administration, we weren't even allowed to say climate change in Florida state politics or in state governance. There was an order not to even name the issue that we're facing. And now it's supposedly loosened under the DeSantis administration, but we recently saw this announcement of a major new funding package for climate resilience, in which he named all of the associated impacts of climate change and not the issue itself, which is global warming and carbon emissions. And so what would you say is the pitfalls of trying to deal with the symptoms of the problem without actually dealing with the core of it?
Wow, you hit on a really, sort of deep topic, but, McDonald's doesn't want to sell less hamburgers, right? But if there's a movement afoot, all of a sudden you see them offering pomegranate smoothies and salads, right? So some of this, and it's really important that we're here tonight, because we really need people to take action. So in that appropriation offering, he didn't mention climate change, but the Florida Department of Environmental Protection Secretary, when he tweets the announcement out, he mentions climate change. So there's sort of this tacit, because if you call out the problem, then the only thing we can do is reduce these emissions. And that means gas-fired power plants that are on the horizon need not be built. There's a big 550-mile gas pipeline. And so this infrastructure that's been built in our state, we are past 70% reliant on gas. And when you bring up gas, what they call frack gas, it releases methane, which is 86 plus times more potent than carbon. And so it's really, really powerful. So in a worst case scenario, a gas plant is as bad as a coal plant. So if we take action and we own up to what's causing the problem, then the industries that sell gas or sell electricity or put gas in your gas tank, they don't want to electrify transportation. I mean, it's kind of obvious, right? You know, people want to sell their products, but you know, we're altering the climate of the planet, and there's not a lot of coming back from that. And we have a short window to move serious action. So that's why we're here tonight, right?
Absolutely.
Right. And, you know, just to chime in, you know, if you address the problem, you know, you have to address this, you know, you have to act on solutions. Mm-hmm. Right. And in my thinking, like, that's what's happening. You know, if I don't address it, don't have to address address the problem with actual solutions. And, just to continue on, you know, we're behind, you know, as you said previously, Zach, you know, like for the past 8 years, you know, in legislation, you know, we weren't even allowed to mention climate change. And, you know, we need to continue, we need to move fast and address these issues because, you know, our community, you know, Black communities, the Black and brown communities are suffering from higher rates of asthma, being exposed to air pollution and things like that. And it's all coming from, you know, these fossil fuel, the fossil industry, right? You know what I mean? The energy sector is largely fueled by fossil fuels, and at the same time, these facilities and these plants are near Black and brown neighborhoods, which again are causing higher rates of asthma and being exposed to air pollution. And so, you know, we need to address it, and we need to address we need to address the problem and bring forth genuine solutions that address equity as well.
And so we have a question here in the chat about biofuels, which I think is a great segue into a conversation on what are some of the practical, when we talk about transitioning to a renewable energy economy and reducing our carbon emissions, what types of fuels and what types of strategies are we talking about and are we focusing on in the immediate term? Well, there's multiple ways to get to a renewable energy economy, and that includes the supply end and the demand end. Through supply, through things like renewable energy, like solar panels in the sunshine state, and demand through reduction in the energy we consume. So before we get into the question of the demand side and how we can reduce the demand for energy, I was hoping we might be able to have a little bit of a conversation on what the future of our energy grid looks like here in the state of Florida.
Well, as I mentioned, we're heavily over-reliant on natural gas, and you never want to have all your eggs in any one basket. A lot of people don't realize this, but Florida in the last year sent almost $62.5 billion out of state to bring in fuel from elsewhere, because we just don't make anything. We don't have gas here. We don't have oil here. We don't have uranium, and we don't have coal, right? So we won't dig into demand side management, but you don't want to put a solar panel like on an inefficient building. So when you start, you want to sort of start, I feel like The Sound of Music, we want to start at the very beginning, because the beginning is a very good place to start. I don't know if you remember that from The Sound of Music. So you want to make things more efficient. You want to build things more efficient, and building codes. There's probably like 200 things we need to do. But this principle of stop sending energy dollars here out of state is how we bring equity and justice, because that's how we create jobs. You keep energy dollars here at home, and you help people be more efficient. save money on their electric bill, and you put local people to work doing it, right? And so that's kind of like the blessing, coming and going. But we haven't put a priority on those kinds of things. And solar is the same way. In fact, investor utilities in Florida cover about 75% of the state, and they're incredibly politically powerful. So they haven't wanted to bring a lot of competition to what they're doing. And so again, having a two-decade sort of evolution of watching this, you have to look at how they make money. And investor-owned utilities put major assets in their rate base, and then we continually sort of pay for that. But if people get the benefit and they have their own solar on their home, and even if they pay for it over time, they will get the benefits. So the cost of solar has come down. The cost of wind energy, there's a lot of conversation nationally about sort of bringing in wind from you mentioned the grid. The grid is constantly getting cleaner. And I think a lot of the solutions, we almost haven't even seen them yet, because our cars are all going to be electric, and we're going to sort of store energy at night when we're not using the grid. And there's electric with things like time of use rates, which we don't have now. And so it's going to be a whole different way of creating and consuming energy that we're really kind of not used to. There's going to be autonomous vehicles coming into play. There's a robust market for used electric vehicles, which really help people because you don't have all those maintenance and gas and oil change. And it's going to be a game changer for people across the board economically. So, to your question, it's hard to say one thing. It's all these things. It's 200 things that are going to happen. And it's actually kind of exciting, but we have a real window to move this quickly to avoid these worst implications.
Yeah, and the technology is there. Everything that Susan mentioned, it's there. It exists. And really, it just need the backing of our legislators and the funding. Everything that we can imagine. Having a diversified or source where we get our energy, right? It exists, and we can have it, and that's what it is really great to think about, how the many ways that we can cut carbon emission. It's almost like a science fiction short story, but we can make it happen. And I'd love to see it. I'd love to make, for us to dive deep into all the different renewable energies and take that on. But I think corporations have a strong hold at this very moment, but at whose expense, right? And it's unfortunate that we have the solutions in our pockets. It's just that for whatever reason, multiple reasons, that it's not happening.
Yeah, if you have someone who doesn't have upfront money to make their home more efficient, get new windows or a new air conditioner, you can reduce your energy bill by 25% with just a more highly efficient air conditioner. And then there's always the renter-landlord dilemma, because there's no incentive for landlords to make a property more efficient. But as you said, Mackenzie, we have these technologies. There is a program to help low to middle income, moderate income people finance home improvements with the Solar and Energy Loan Fund, and they are mission driven, and 73% of their loans are in what's called LMI, low to moderate income census tracts. And again, that's one of the reasons I know that you could save about 25% on your electric bill with efficiency measures. The National Renewable Energy Lab has a terrific fact sheet to that. So can I say one more thing, Zach?
Of course.
Yeah. A group called Evolved Energy Research just did a report on Florida called Pathways 350. And the main takeaway that we can't repeat often enough is it doesn't cost more to transition to clean energy solutions than we would pay for traditional sources of energy. It's not like they're free. And, I'm always taken when you even think about a gallon of gas and you go to a gas station, that's not what it costs us. There's all these taxes and, money in the military to protect, to bring the oil in. And so we need to pay for the true value. And right now we are subsidizing people who put out greenhouse gas emissions, polluters, to pollute for free. We're all paying for it. So that's kind of a big part of the discussion on the national stage. And it really will impact what happens locally and in the state, because in the Biden administration, they are going to place a value on this dangerous carbon pollution. So again, we've been subsidizing polluters to pollute for free. And once there's a price on that, that'll help also to finance some of these, a just transition. But in the end, it really doesn't cost more to transition. We may need to do some infrastructure things along the way and move people along. But anyway, there are ways for income for lower income homeowners to finance some of these improvements. There's a lot more that has to happen, but those are some of the sort of puzzle pieces along the way to a just transition.
Yeah, and so you mentioned that we have the technology currently, and there's other technology that we're even experimenting right now, like algae biofuels, for instance, as an exciting and potential new source of energy, although not yet completely proven. But considering that we do have the pathways to get to a renewable energy economy, I'm hoping we could move on to an exploration of why we haven't gotten there yet. And I'd like to start off with a little bit of a explanation of the most powerful and largely the most unaccountable political body in the state of Florida that you've never heard of, the Florida Public Service Commission. The Florida Public Service Commission being a body that is appointed by the governor and the legislature. They don't have elections as they do in other states. They are appointed by elected officials. And their mission is to regulate the energy industry, basically the investor-owned utilities that we have here in the state of Florida, in a manner that balances the quote-unquote needs of the energy utilities and their shareholders with the needs of the people of Florida. And so for a long time, we found that some of the ways in which the Public Service Commission interprets the rules of the legislation that we have already on the books here in the state of Florida is a little bit lacking. And so, Susan, I was hoping you might be able to get into a little bit of an exploration of some of the things that are up in front of the Public Service Commission today, how they've historically dealt with energy issues and efficiency issues, and how we might be able to change that.
Yeah, as you sort of hinted, it's one of these regulatory agencies that most people are not familiar with, but they really do play a big role in people's lives. So they regulate the largest utilities. So they're the investor-owned utilities like Duke Energy and Tampa Electric and Florida Power and Light and Gulf Power, but also the some aspects of the Orlando Utility Commission and JEA, the Jacksonville utility, that are they're owned by their cities, but they regulate them as far as setting conservation goals. It's sort of like where do I begin? So the Florida Public Service Commission is a creature of the legislature. And so they fund them, and they also manage the nominating council. And when they nominate people, they send those names to the governor. And as you mentioned, Zach, the governor makes those selections. So, they have a lot of input who gets on. They're not necessarily consumer minded individuals. And they allow whether or not utilities can build new power plants or even new solar farms. They set conservation goals every 5 years, and that's something that's in the process right now. And so we'll mention that. So energy efficiency, is the fastest and cleanest and cheapest way to meet our energy needs. And right now, it's very much of an equity issue because people who are more affluent are getting more efficient all the time. You get new windows or new appliances or a new air conditioner or insulation, right? So it's people, as I mentioned earlier, renters, and also people who are lower income who may not have those upfront monies. That's one of the reasons why I mentioned a way to get low interest financing for some of these improvements, So even if you get solar, energy efficiency is the cheapest. But let's talk about solar, which has gotten cheaper and cheaper over the years. But even if you finance it and you pay it off in 4 or 5 or 6 years, then you get 25 years of free electricity. And that's what we need to make sure, that there aren't just groups of people that are kind of shut out from benefiting from that. Decisions we make today in energy stick with us for a very long time. When you site a new gas plant, it's around for 60 years. Also in sort of the equity space now, there's a lot of work around where do we put charging infrastructure for electric vehicles. And if we're not careful up front and make sure that it's in diverse areas and all sorts of different neighborhoods, we'll end up with another digital divide like we have, in sort of the Wi-Fi space, right? And so it's really important, the decisions that we're making now. So the Public Service Commission sets conservation goals every 5 years for the big utilities. Last fall, the utilities were asking for zero, near zero, and near zero goals. The commissioners actually stood up and rejected the staff's recommendation to accept these zero and near zero goals. And then they came in with their program plans. Florida is just dismal. I mean, there's only a few states that are sort of worse than we are. We use antiquated cost benefit test that just doesn't allow any good programs through. And one of my colleagues likes to say, the rate impact measure is a cost benefit test, and you could come in and literally knock holes in walls, and that would pass the rate impact measure. But if it affects rates, and of course being more efficient would be all about saving money, it would affect rates. So they eliminate all that. They eliminate the cheap stuff. They deploy a 2-year payback screen, and these are practices that game the system, really. So they have gamed the system with these cost benefit tests. So we just don't get good outcomes, and it's just really criminal because it hurts the people who are most vulnerable the worst. So there's a rulemaking process at the Public Service Commission, and I think Carson is going to drop in the chat. There's an action alert landing page. Just click on it. A letter will come up, and you can edit that letter, put your own personal story in it, but get it registered with the Public Service Commission that you're paying attention, because these are very behind the scenes arcane processes, and the agency itself, as you said, most people don't even know it exists. But these are really important measures, and it's how we avoid building new power plants. And building new power plants is what makes your bill go up and also brings more pollution. But these are crucial issues, and I appreciate you all, bringing this to people's attention this evening, because it's so important.
Absolutely. And, the Public Service Commission has been a bit of a barrier to progress historically towards getting energy efficiency off the ground and, encouraging the development of more renewable energy-based electric and energy system. However, another thing that needs to be considered is the fact that the legislature in Tallahassee has not been too comfortable or too ahead of the curve in terms of advancing us towards a clean energy economy. A lot of the energy that we've been seeing has been at the local level, with really amazing initiatives to commit to Ready for 100 goals, which are goals of achieving 100% renewable energy within a municipality or a state or a county by a certain date, usually between 2035 and 2040. Now, we've seen about 11 cities in Florida make Ready for 100 commitments, including Safety Harbor, Dunedin, Largo, Gainesville, Tallahassee, St. Petersburg, South Miami, Orlando, Sarasota, Satellite Beach, and Cocoa. We have Manatee County, Sarasota, and Tampa making strides towards implementing their own policies. Susan, I was hoping you might be able to tell us a little bit about the strides that Tampa is making towards their goals on becoming a more pro-renewable energy city.
Yeah, and you mentioned sort of the lack of real leadership at the state level, and for the last 8 years, we've had a lack of leadership at the federal level. So if you lack leadership, then the local governments become the laboratories of democracy. And in addition to what's going on in Tampa, I will mention some regional efforts as well. So if you're not going to get leadership at the state level, people are going to kind of fill in that vacuum. So for quite some time, the city of Tampa, which happens to be my hometown, was really sitting on the sidelines. And they got a new mayor, woman named Mayor Jane Castor. She's a former police chief. And during the campaign, and I may he rest in peace, Kent Bailey, an activist in the Tampa area with the Sierra Club, had gone to Jane Castor as she was running and got her to commit to 100% by 2045. And as soon as she got in, she formed an advisory team. I'm on that as our, I don't know, probably 25 other people as well. But they're setting out to do a plan. They're joining into some of these collaboratives, the Resilient Cities Collaborative, that are giving them real metrics. This stuff isn't easy. We have had a fossil fuel based energy system that is systematized in. And that's why at one point it's all scary to me, but it's exciting too to watch this transition as, for instance, electric cars come online. So, she's got to start with getting their internal operations. There's sort of a pathway that you go down, and the city of Tampa is on the pathway. And Hillsborough County added a new leader named Harry Cohen to that county commission, with joining already leaders there. And then Hillsborough and Tampa are part of the Tampa Bay Regional Resiliency Coalition. And that formed in 2018, where 32 local governments have come together to look at both adaptation and greenhouse gas reduction measures. There's been a compact in the South Florida region for, I think it's 12 years now, and East Central Florida. So again, another 30 plus local governments. And there are some initiatives in Southwest Florida and Jacksonville area at different sort of levels. So it's exciting. You're seeing places like the city of Tampa that have been on the sidelines kind of jumping into the deep end of the pool. And that means, in short, making your own internal operations more efficient, transitioning your fleets, and then offering your community opportunities like financing or joining these solar co-ops. Solar United Neighbors is another ally, and they form co-ops. So these are ways that the community can actually participate in it. So it's exciting to see some movement, but we just got to move forward faster.
Yeah, I think just what's happening up at the Capitol, I think there's a lot of fear. I think people there's fear in seeing like that the people are trending towards clean energy. That these counties, multiple counties, are trending towards, are committing to 100% clean energy, and they're not ready for that for whatever reason, right? And I think because of that we are starting to see a lot of these preemptive bills that are stripping communities of local power and local democracy, and being able to say, hey, this is what we want for our community, right? And these, like Senate Bill 856 and the multiple other bills, they're reacting to the people making a decision for what they want for their own community. And that's unfortunate. I mean, it's awful. It's evil, in my opinion. Like, and yeah, I think that's even, as we see these bills come forth, I think that's even more reason for us to say, this is why we need clean energy. I think because as the people, we're even across party lines, we're seeing people trend towards clean energy, and wanting that in their community, having solar panels, right? Poor and rich, they have incentives in solar, and for whatever reason, these large corporations, funding in money to pop these bills out, right? To stop what's inevitable, right?
Right. Well, people don't often give up money or power easily, right? Women got the right to vote in 1920, but it was women chaining themselves literally to the Capitol and going on hunger strikes. And I mean, people don't give up, right? So here we are with, you know, this fossil fuel energy system that been with for a long time, and we're transitioning. And you know, whatever you move away from, there's always going to be winner and a loser, or to some extent. I think you really see the utilities moving. I was reading through a rate case. It's a notice, not a filing, but Tampa Electric, for instance, estimates that with their 600 megawatts of solar they want to add as part of their rate case, they'll be at 14% driven by solar. I mean, statewide now we're like, 2% of solar. So, you know, if you make money off, you know, building power plants, and you make money by providing the fuel. So in this case, you know, utilities don't make money off fuel. That is a pass through. But if their parent company owns a pipeline, then their sister company is making money, right? And this is just infrastructure. And so, you know, we can do this. And of course, people who've been making money selling things a certain way, you know, we have monopoly utilities because at the time universal service was a problem, right? But that's not really an issue anymore. So we have monopoly utilities that kind of hold people captive. You know, we are one of only a few states where the law expressly prohibits you from buying electricity from someone other than your kind of government sponsored utility. So it's sort of understandable because they got a pretty sweetheart deal. You know, Florida Power and Light, you know, where you are, Mackenzie, they have done a notice for another rate filing for a rate increase in the billions of dollars, and they're asking for an 11.5% rate of return. So that's just a fact. And so that's a good deal, right? Lots of people would love to get 11.5%. So, you know, we applaud the utility for doing a lot of utility scale solar, and that's great. But we don't want to block people, families, businesses from enjoying the benefits of solar as well. And there's been a history in Florida of doing that. So hopefully we'll keep shining the light on. And that's why it's so important all these people are here listening in tonight.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now we've touched on both the series of preemption bills that we're seeing in the state legislature, these bills that would take power away from local governments to control energy infrastructure, either through preventing them from, you know, keeping energy infrastructure they don't want in areas they don't want out of those areas and out of their county, as well as preventing them from really incentivizing and requiring the development of, you know, clean energy infrastructure or even the maintenance of existing infrastructure. So we're talking about that, and we're also talking about the fact that there are these plans by the utilities to expand their solar footprints for their large industrial scale solar farms that they're trying to establish throughout the state. And those are great. However, we're seeing that come together in a very interesting, in some ways, pretty negative way. So we have one of these preemption bills, 856, is a real monster. It would take away all power for local governments to regulate their energy infrastructure whatsoever. We're also seeing a sneakier bill with a smaller scope, which is SB 1008, which would only take away the capacity for local governments to say no to solar farms on agricultural land, or to even at all influence you know, these new mega solar projects cropping up on agricultural land throughout the state. And it would also increase the potential size of these huge solar farms can be without getting extra levels of oversight. And that sounds great from a clean energy standpoint. But at the same time, we're seeing you know, the autonomy of local communities being trammeled by legislation like this. And so, Mackenzie, I was hoping that you might be able to talk to us a little bit about why that's a little bit of a poison chalice, and why we can't necessarily why we can't necessarily say that anything that promotes utilities doing what they want to push through these mega projects is a good thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could look at what's been happening since March. Many of the utilities companies, and since the outbreak of the pandemic, honestly, many of these utilities companies have been trying their best to disconnect folks, from their power. And I, shutoffs, shutoffs been happening for quite some time. And this past year, was it 330,000 folks have been disconnected in 2020, right? And they're also asking for higher rates from and expected to charge Florida customers in the billions. I believe Duke also recently filed something looking to increase consumer rates over 5%, and that's 0.5 for industrial industries, right? The commercial industries, right? And then also they're looking to have a $30 minimum for Duke customers, right? So just from what we seeing, how they've reacted to the pandemic, how they're still still looking for energy efficiency goals at zero, still continuing to increase rates. I don't see any positive, anything positive coming from allowing the utilities companies to run wild. It got so bad that our organization ourselves, we had, we raised money to get 90 families we sent them $200 gift cards to 90 families to help them keep their lights on and keep their and to be able to have food to eat. A lot of these people that are concerned with getting their lights shut off, they have to make a decision between like, okay, I need lights on, or I can feed or feed my family, and we didn't want them to have that option, right? And we're seeing. I was on phone calls with community members myself, that week of Christmas, right? And saying thank you so much. I didn't want to have to be able to choose between feeding my family, keeping my lights on, especially during the holidays, which they were cutting off folks during the holidays, utilities companies. So again, there need more regulation. Public service needs to get the attention on themselves to show and be shown from by Florida people, the Florida people, that that they're doing that what utilities companies and the Public Service Commission are doing is wrong, and it's flawed, and they need more regulation on the utilities companies. And I personally don't want to allow them to continue to run wild, and because we're seeing what's happening right now under COVID.
Hey, Zach, I just wanted to weave this whole thread through and pick up exactly on what Mackenzie said. And we can get back to some of these preemption bills because I think it's important. But you're talking about we don't offer utility efficiency programs, right? So it's hard for people to lower their bill. And then we wonder why so many people have a high energy burden. And that's a term of art. And that's the disproportionately high percentage of their income that they're paying for their power bill, which, again, if you're low income, that you typically have a high energy burden. And then we have all these enormous amounts of disconnect. And I'll put you on the spot in a second, Zach, because you've been tracking all the disconnects, but it's a very disheartening number, right? So we've got no efficiency. We've got high energy burden, we got no disconnects, and now we have all the utilities, the investing utilities coming in for rate increases, some in the hundreds of millions and some in the billions, and you guys ticked off, some specifics. So anyway, Zach, I don't know if you want to speak to the high level of disconnects, but it really is heart-wrenching.
Yeah, Mackenzie put it pretty, articulated pretty well. We saw in 2020, 330,000 people get disconnected from their power, 10% of which did not get reconnected. That's 30, and that's actually not 330,000 people. That's 330,000 households There could be entire families, 33,000 of whom did not get reconnected to their power. And that's just for the major investor-owned utilities. We're trying to get the data for the public utilities to complete that, but even without that data, that's a grisly human toll. And so Mackenzie highlighted some of the individual efforts that community members and nonprofits have made to help people pay their power bills, but we've not seen much come from the state. And in fact, while other states had oversight of their electric utilities, mandated that they not disconnect people for a certain amount of time, provided funding to help people, repay their bills, mandated that the programs that utilities offer to help people get ahead of their bills and even still paying, just extending that payment over a longer period of time, nothing came from the state or the Public Service Commission. They left it all up to the utilities. And that seems to be what their philosophy is. Let these utilities, which have monopoly status and can essentially do what they want, do as they will. And that when you're talking about something as important as energy infrastructure, it's hard to leave that completely up to entities that are not really accountable to Floridians. They're accountable to their shareholders.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I know there's more questions in the chat, but I wanted to express to people this concept of preemption. Preemption is when the state sort of strips local governments of their power. They preempt something. So in the city of Key West, they had passed, is it a city or a town? But in Key West, they passed a ban on a certain kind of sunscreen because it is harmful to coral reefs. So they passed it. And then the state weighed in and said, no, you can't do that. And they stripped them. So that's happening on a lot of fronts. We're here obviously talking about climate and energy. And now all of a sudden there's a smattering of bills. So there's been no action at the federal level. There's been a little bit on adaptation, but not the kind of action on climate that we need at the state level. So local governments and then some of these the Tampa Bay Regional Resiliency Coalition, these regional collaboratives are sort of stepping up, and they're creating regional action plans. So now it's not just one bill, there's 3 bills, I guess 4 bills now. One is aimed at these regional planning councils to strip them of all their power. There's another bill that says that a local government cannot have a greenhouse gas reduction, sort of program, or the region can't without state authority, right? And so they're just in, and then the energy one, where when they want to build a pipeline or a solar farm, for instance, in Archer, Florida, in Alachua County, there's a historically Black neighborhood, and they were going to put a solar farm in there, and it's not the right place because those folks, rightfully so, were worried about their property values and all of that. So wherever the infrastructure is, we just need to be smart. There's plenty of rooftops, and there's plenty of places that are not in people's neighborhoods to put up solar farms. And so we're just seeing that as a theme, and I've been in the legislative process for quite some time, and just the last few years, they have just depleted local governments of their responsibilities, and they're the ones that are closest to the people. So it does seem very inconsistent with the theoretical conservative philosophy.
Wonderful. Yeah, absolutely agreed. And just to answer a brief question that we had in the chat, we recently posted a link to a tool where the U.S. Department of Energy, which can show you a really amazing image of the energy infrastructure in your state and your region, identified in a map format. So really cool link to check out for folks in the chat. But circling back to this conversation we've been having, we've kept on talking about who are the utilities accountable to, is the state accountable to, who are these local governments accountable to, and how do we make sure that the entities that govern what infrastructure is put in place actually are pegged to the will of the people who live in this state and our needs. And so at that, I want to, as we end this, our time here, I want to pivot back to Mackenzie to talk about a really amazing toolkit which the Miami Climate Alliance is putting forward on an Ready for 100% Energy accountability toolkit. You want to introduce that and a little bit of what the Miami Climate Alliance is trying to do in Miami?
Yeah, of course, of course. So yeah, in Miami, we're dealing with rising seas, increased temperatures, gentrification, hurricanes, and we don't like Miami is like the perfect place to say to say we don't have the time. Climate change is here. For many of the folks in Miami, and that's why we need to focus on implementation. We have our 100% accountability toolkit. If drop the link in that just to take a look at that. We joined the 100% movement here in Miami-Dade, and we want to be able to, or not, we haven't joined the movement, but we would like to continue that and have 100% clean renewable energy. And beyond that movement, and we have that toolkit to make sure as we implement that we make sure that we're doing what's necessary at an equitable in an equitable lens, essentially. And I do want to invite people to take a look at the Miami Climate Alliance and the work that we do. We do a lot of great work. We have multiple working groups, like I said earlier, I'm on that clean energy working group space and trying to get 100% in Miami-Dade. And if you're at all interested, please click on those links and join us. I also want to drop in Florida Rising as well, of course. We're a multiracial movement, and we do a lot of great work in the climate justice sector. We want to make sure, like we're in these space. Like I want to make sure when we enter these clean energy spaces, it's a pretty white space, honestly, right? And as I enter those, I want to make sure that we consider frontline communities, Black and Brown communities in that conversation, for sure.
Absolutely. And so, as we have 3 minutes left, I think we'll take some final questions if anybody in the chat wants to issue them. And also, I'll pivot it back to you, and starting with you, Susan. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
So I can't totally see the chat, but I'm hoping that Carson dropped the link in. If people want to send a letter to the Florida Public Service Commission to urge them to drop antiquated cost-benefit tests so people can get energy efficiency programs, it would be a very important thing for you to do. And we're at a crossroads, and we're going to need everybody, and climate change is the epic issue of our time. And to literally alter the climate of the planet, and it's happening faster, the way the ice is melting and the seas are rising and the heat. And so there sort of isn't anything more kind of important. And then within that, you have these sort of exacerbated issues that happen to people, who are most vulnerable and in frontline communities. So I just encourage you, as Mackenzie said, and Zach, just join us and get plugged in. Our website, cleanenergy.org, is filled with information and blogs, and we just released our third annual energy efficiency in the Southeast. And so there's lots of groups that can give you data and fact sheets so that you're armed with information. But do that today. Reach out to any one of us, and we'd love to plug you in. And there's 10 different ways to do that. So, Zach, I appreciate the time tonight.
Absolutely. Yeah, you being here.
The Public Service Commission is thriving off of the lack of they don't get attention. You know what I mean? They're thriving off of that. Like we don't know their names. We don't know that exist. We don't know that they're the ones that's responsible for regulating our utility bills. So many of us complain about our power bills, right? You know what I mean? Like, oh, why is it so high? And what can we do about it? But there's only so much that we personally can do about it. but there is an entity, there's a body of people that can do something. That's a public service commission. So again, you know, send out those letters, send out those emails, letting them know that this is unacceptable, you know, and call out their names.
Well, and it's one thing to pick people's pocket, is another thing to alter the climate of the planet for future generations. So, and when you lock into a plant or you don't do efficiency, those are emissions we're going to have to live with for 20, 40, 60 years. So it's really scary stuff, to think that it's really money kind of driving the train, and it can't be. And the only way that we can overpower that is with people power. And we need every single one of you and all your friends and family to join us.
Every single one, yes.
Well, thank you both so much for being here today. We really appreciate this and all the amazing knowledge you've shared. Thank you so much, and you know, happy Energy Week.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you so much.